Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another New Jersey Constitutional Republicans virtual conversation. It's my great privilege and pleasure tonight to have Mr. Josh Aikens join me. Josh, thank you for coming tonight.
I appreciate you having me, JR.
Josh has got a wonderful backdrop there. I love the George Washington stars there he has on appropriately for the month of February. Our two great presidents, two greatest presidents in my estimation, born the same month. And great to see that backdrop. And Josh, tell us a little bit about yourself and the fine organization now that you're heading up.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I've been a lifelong New Jersey resident. Politics kind of came to me a little bit later in life. It just wasn't a focus until I started, owning my own home, started to pay, tons of taxes and had a lot of questions about what was going on. Married, I have two young boys under the age of 6. Excited to have them. It was actually outside sleigh riding with them before. So the snow, they're loving the snow. I'm not liking it. My back is definitely not liking it. But yeah, so recently I was
I'm with him.
yeah, right. Recently I was named the chairman of Arise New Jersey, and it's a fairly young organization, but the focus of that is around our public schools. I think you remember maybe before, a little bit before my time, there was this movement to take conservatives and Christians out of the public school forum, set up parochials, and they said, we're going to be over here and you're going to be over there. And neither show those two meet until maybe college or university. And what has happened over time is we have not had a voice in the public forum, and we're losing ground because of it. So there's a couple of us throughout the state already that have been on school boards for some time. I've been on for, this is my third term, where we're focused on making sure that we keep everything in line and making sure that conservatives and family people have a voice and have a say. For instance, my school district, I know there's a few throughout the state. We never closed for COVID. We were always in person, and that was a main goal for me. And, thankfully I have a wonderful administration to work with. The staff and the teachers, they were, fantastic. And, there was some hemming and hawing at first, but, we went through every room. We measured with a ruler, 6 feet here, 6 feet there. We made sure that they had every single precaution that they needed and they felt safe with. And so far, we've maybe closed once because of a scare, only due to the states changing from their color scheme of yellow to orange. Once they do orange, then a whole section of school has to go out. So we just shut the whole school down for a week. And overall, it's been positive for the kids, and it's been fantastic for the parents. They do not have any sort of complaints whatsoever. Those that want to keep their kids home, we allow that, but there has been zero, which is fantastic. And I'm just trying to make sure that we get more voices on school boards. I know you were at the Arise event when I spoke, and I said, it's great to get that group of people. We had about 200 people there that evening. It's great to get that group of people, like-minded individuals, passionate individuals in a room. However, we're just in that room. If you're not on the school boards, if you're not out there volunteering, then you really have no say. And that's really just the focus of our group right now, is just getting more people on school boards and letting them know that, it's a nonpartisan position. So, even if you are a centrist Democrat, we help get you on the school board. Maybe a 90s Democrat will get you on the school. I mean, not so much now, but I think that it's a good thing, and it's a way to engage the community and sort of build that sense of camaraderie back with the community.
Well, I was very impressed, Josh, when I first heard about this organization and your objective in helping parents and citizens get on school boards. To me, this is really essentially where it starts, because we have always, the constitutional Republicans, we've talked about the importance of local government and the participation of the people who are once educated on civics and the history of our nation, and really essentially the initial intent of education, which was indeed arithmetic and reading and writing and the classics and learning Greek and learning about English and learning many skills now that aren't given to the children, but are still very, very important. But I think your work and your organization is one of the most important organizations in the state, because you will help students who want to run for school board. And as a matter of fact, I'm thinking about, because of what you've started, I'm going to look into getting on the school board in my township. And I would encourage all of the different, all of our citizens out there who want to get involved some way politically, that they start at the school board, or that they start at the freeholder level. We've got so many people who want to run for governor right away, and they have no experience whatsoever. They haven't worked in any kind of local government whatsoever, and they all think that they can, they're going to snap their fingers and make everything right again, which is not going to happen. You need to learn. You need to start in the minor leagues, in the instructional league. You got to go to single, double A, triple, and then you're in the majors. And that's really where it starts, is with the school board. So I really commend you and the rest of the organization, and along with what Greg Quinlan's doing, and
Yep.
the other organizations, the organizations that are out there, the Family Alliance Council. Of course, we were fortunate enough to have them on the last program. But what you're doing with this Arise New Jersey, and getting and helping people um, run for school boards, is essential. Now, what can people do? Tell them how they can get a hold of you, so that you're able to help them get on school boards.
Yeah, sure. So for right now, because it just happened, I don't have my email set up for Arise. However, most people can reach out to me through any sort of social media. I'm on every platform you can mention. I can't stand it, but I am. Or you could,
Yeah, I see it.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I know it's a terrible addiction. Um, or they can reach out to you, and I can get in contact with them.
Sure.
And but what you
Yep,
said, I
we'd
want
be
to
happy to.
I want to go back to what you said about starting small. It is important for people to realize that if politics are the thing or the path you want to do, there is nothing more important than ensuring and securing your community first. Taking a look at the
That's right.
big picture is great. However, if you've not built a foundation and built small, start with your town, start with your county, and move on to the state from there. If you don't do that, then really what good are you doing? And we do have a lot of people that were able to jump up and do fantastic things, but there's just that sense that you lose about if you don't start at the lower level. I think that that gives me more of a sense of why I'm doing this. I'll always be able to look back and say, if I ever decide to do something bigger than this, I'll be able to say, I started the school board, and this is what I wanted to do. It was my passion. It wasn't paid. No one's, giving me donations or anything like that. This is something that I chose to do and I wanted to do because, and I didn't even have kids in the school at the time. We weren't even married. I moved into this community and I immediately jumped on the board. And it's just something that I wanted to do because I saw that no one else was doing it. And that gets to the point of so many times throughout the state, school board seats go empty or unopposed. And it's really kind of sad to see because I do feel, maybe 3 or 4 decades ago, we had a community. Everyone was involved, PTO, school board, local sports, whether it was a group like Rotary or even like an Elks Lodge, stuff like that. We don't have that anymore. And the sense of community is almost abandoned. And if we are able to get more and more people on school boards, maybe we can start growing that back.
Yeah, I think that's an outstanding objective, and I want to recognize our great friend Sean Hyland, who's the leader of the Family Alliance Council of New Jersey. We had on for a great conversation a couple of weeks ago. Sean Hyland, we gave a great speech in Trenton the other day during the Right to Life um, gathering there, March. So we want to say hello to our good friend Sean and highlight his work. But what you're doing, Josh, with the looking to encourage people to run for the school board. Of course, the founders understood that the education was really the most important priority in maintaining the government that they devised, a democratic constitutional republic. And it required the participation of the citizens in assuring, first of all, knowing their rights. And that's where our civics class is coming in. We're actually going to start our second class in a couple of weeks on February 18th. We have it above me there for people who'd like to participate. And they can email njconstitutionalrepublicans@gmail.com to get the link to the class. It was well received, but of course, on school boards, parents are having a great effect on how the school is conducted. They do have an effect on the curriculum, which is so important. We know of many of the deficiencies in the curriculums. And of course, Josh, we can go back to two of the worst Supreme Court decisions in the nation's history with Engel v. Vital, eliminating the Bible, and prayer, which is when Abington v. School Board in 1860 or 1962 and 1963 consecutively. These two rulings eliminated prayer and Bible reading from our public education systems, which were essentially, the Bible was the main textbook for well over 150 years. And of course, prayer was an essential ingredient in teaching a citizen or a child what it is to be good and to be humble and to depend upon God, their creator, for their life and for their family. And of course, eliminating the Bible and the prayer, Josh, we have clearly seen the deterioration of our society. And I think of no two greater, along with Roe v. Wade, of course, no two greater decisions having a detrimental effect on our nation than those two decisions, and they involved public education.
Yeah. I honestly, I don't think I could have summarized it better than you did. Not having that connection to our Christian background, because we are a Christian nation, as I know a lot of people don't like that, or maybe it's verboten to even say, but it's true. We are a Christian nation. So losing that foundation of where we get the idea or the belief that our rights are given to us by our creator kind of, doesn't sink in as much as it should, right? If you don't have the context behind it, then it's just words in a book. And that's what our history books sometimes become. Now, when I was growing up in school, we didn't have the Bible as well being taught to us. However, I had some fantastic history teachers and fantastic civics teachers that, leaned on that sort of information and brought back that context that sort of may be lacking nowadays in public education.
Right. And some people may object to the idea that we are a Christian nation. However, what we have been learning in the first class, the American model of our civics courses, was the American model is essentially the Declaration of Independence. And we read right away in the first sentence of the Declaration that the founders looked to the laws of nature and nature's God in entitling them to the separation that they were seeking from the injustices imposed upon them by England and the crown. They didn't appeal to another dictator or another emperor in some other nation of the world. They appealed unto God. They said, God has given us this right, and he is entitling us, asking us for this. And they recognize the laws of nature and nature's God. And that is a phrase that has been completely been eliminated in our civics, in our education classes, and by our representatives. And how can we talk about the history of our nation and the creation of our government if we don't first recognize the authority by which the founders founded our nation? And this is why we're talking about this in the civics course. And it all starts with the Declaration of Independence. And from there, we have other lofty principles, talking about the self-evident truth that all men are created equal. No one is born to rule over another man or to oppress another person without their consent. And then, of course, the God-given, not government-given, but God-given unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And there's plenty of conversation, Josh, that we can go into in defining what that means. And then we get into the consent of the governed, a totally unique, a revolutionary idea, Josh, that the founders would devise a government where those who were being governed would be the authority, not the king, not a oligarchy, not a strong man, but all the people would consent to be governed as long as the government was securing their God-given unalienable natural rights. And now we can clearly see that the government isn't doing a very good job in that regard. And that's why we need reform. And reform starts with education.
Yeah. Have you ever mentioned this to the fella down in Trenton about the citizens are the rulers? Because I'm pretty sure that he's not participating in that type of scenario. He's just off on his own tangent. And really, it's sad to see what the citizens of the state allow. It's
That's right.
It's tragic. It's tragic that, you know, that this virus came around. I'm not one of the people that are going to say that this virus doesn't exist, because it does. And up in, you know, not so much my county, but, you know, one county over, in my congressional district, you know, there was a lot of death. You know, whether or not, you know, I'm sure there'll be investigations about whether or not it has to do with long-term care facility, which Murphy pushed. But still, where we're at right now is just, it's like we're a beaten dog, and we can't even look up to help ourselves out. And I'm hoping that we get more people, such as yourself and some of the other Republicans around the state, that are going to fight and push back and, you know, do something. I mean, even if they're not running for office, conservative-minded individuals, even if they're libertarian or independent, that's fine by me too, honestly. I just need more people that are speaking up and that are going to use logic and a sense of reason for how they want their government to be treating them. And right now, the way this government is treating us, and just specifically in this state, not the nation in general, is
Right.
it is an abomination of everything that we've held so firm, or everything we're taught was supposed to be our government. You can't rule by executive order. I don't know what even number he's on now, 900, 800. At this point, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. You know, one, maybe two here and there sprinkled, but I mean, I think at one point I lost count at 30. So and we just, the people down in Trenton continue to give him a blank check to do this. And I do feel, you know, just as someone, you know, a general person, I do feel that we are sort of helpless because of it. I see some people fighting and trying to get an hour here and there for the Super Bowl. It's like, you know, you're fighting for an hour for the Super Bowl, like you're a grounded kid asking your parent to go out or go play in a game after school. Like, this is not a small thing. People have been losing their jobs, their livelihood, generations worth of knowledge are fleeing this state. And that was one thing that New Jersey had for so long, was family built businesses where the grandfather came over from Europe or wherever they came over from, and they built up their business on their backs. And then they gave that to their kids, and then they gave that to their kids, and so on and so forth. They're gone now. There is no kids to give it to, because they're out of here. And I don't blame them. If I was a young, you know, 20 something, and I was getting out in the world, I wouldn't stay in New Jersey. I really wouldn't. And I love this state more than anything, and I'll probably never ever leave, because my wife won't let me. But I think that we're losing what it even means to be from New Jersey. I don't even know what it means to be from New Jersey anymore, and it's sad.
It truly is. And you make a lot of good points there, of course, Josh. And one of the things that we can say is, and we've been talking about the constitutional Republicans from day one of the shutdown, of the constitutionality of executive orders, even prior to the pandemic. There's no mention of executive orders in the state constitution of Article 5, which has to do with the executive branch, nor are there executive orders in the federal constitution. And we see the executive orders on steroids, if you will, or what I say is FDR on steroids, which Biden has been engaged in since he's taken office. And it's very similar to the unwritten Constitution that Woodrow Wilson and the progressives adored with the British Constitution, which isn't written down. It's a verbal Constitution. Our founders were genius and brilliant enough to write it down, and that's what has to be enforced. And this is what you're talking about with the people seemingly to be completely acquiesced in allowing all of these essentially tyranny of their civil rights. Some businesses being allowed to open, others not. Some people are allowed to go here, others are allowed to go there. Totally arbitrary. Everything is done broad brush. There's no consideration for local government, and the local government, they're the people that know the most about the particular circumstances within those local governments. But what you're seeing, Josh, and it's unprecedented in the respect that no governor has taken such a progressive, if you will. And of course, that word comes from what the political ideology that Woodrow Wilson really created. FDR took it to a whole different plateau with his unprecedented four presidential terms. And even in his first inaugural, Josh, FDR said that the Great Depression was a war, and the Congress has to give me unlimited power in fighting this war. And of course, calling this pandemic a war it's been done. It's contrived. It's been done deliberately to exploit this issue. And this is why the legislature needs to get together and put not only a stop to the executive orders and require them to be, first of all, they need to be written down and legislated properly. And then the idea that we can, any crisis, I mean, you see the overreaction that the governor was involved with the snowstorm. He's involved. He has his hand in every single situation. Every single crisis is exploited. And this is because of his ideology of government. He believes the government can take care of the person from womb to tomb, and the government has to be actively involved. And this runs contrary to James Madison's view that the Constitution and the structure of the Constitution restricts the ability of one person or one branch of government from unleashing unilateral power, as we've seen the governor is exploited. And this is really essentially our biggest problem. And that's why I thought that the civics course is so important right now, that people realize, because as you said, there are too many people that are seemingly just laying down. And amazingly, a lot of our elected officials are not pushing back on Phil Murphy and the Democrats. They could take this opportunity to show the inaccuracies of the progressive ideology of government, and they could show the superiority of the Madisonian view of government, which protects the people's rights and correlates with the universal principles given in the Declaration of Independence. So it's very, very important that we, the constitutional Republicans, and you doing what you're doing with wanting to get people on school boards who will understand these initial principles and understand what we're talking about and teaching in these civics courses, to realize that the sovereignty is in the hands of the people, not Phil Murphy, who believes in this ideology of government controlling everything. And of course, our founders went to great lengths, especially Madison, in devising a constitution that would restrict this type of over governance.
Well, I mean, even you want to take an example, just go to harken back to schools. So I can go into New York City, go to the subway, touch everything that there is to touch in the largest city on the planet, come back, and if I'm a teacher, I don't have to stay out. But if I go fly to rural Texas for a weekend and come back, I have to be out for 10 days. Now, does no one see some sort of flaw in that whole thing?
Right.
But no, but because New York is right next to us, that's okay. And let's be fair about it, because we know New York is the moneymaker and that's where all the money is coming from. I think that every state should be open. I mean, I'm not one to say that you shouldn't be able to go anywhere. You should be able to go wherever you want. You're a citizen of this country. You should be able to go to wherever you want. That's the point. And I shouldn't be restricted because, someone that I've never met before, who I didn't vote for, who doesn't represent any sort of idea that I've ever thought in my head, tells me to do so. I mean, what
Mhm.
do they expect people to do? I'm just going to tell him no. And I guess we'll see where that falls. Um, and I would like more people to start doing that. I know we had the gentleman down in Belmar, with a gym over there. Oh, it's escaping my mind right
Ian
now.
Smith.
Attila, yeah, Ian Smith and Attilas. Um, those guys, I mean, they put their necks out for a lot of people, and they were at the forefront of all this. I don't know what's going on with it now, but I'm sure they're being litigated up to their gills,
Mhm.
and that's how they beat people. That's how they beat the average man or woman, is they just start throwing court cases at you, and they know you can't afford it, and they have unlimited funding, so they'll just keep doing it. And that's I don't know if people are okay with that. I don't know if the general population is okay with the government treating you like they're your parent. They can tell you
Mhm.
what you can and cannot do, when you can and
Mhm.
cannot do it, and how you can and cannot do things. It's just, I don't know where we are at right now. And time and time again, I hear people just throw their hands up and say, well, it is what it is. Just, do this, stay inside, or, put your masks on. And I guess masks right now, what are we up to, 3 masks? And everything will be fine. Like, no, I don't want Big Brother to take care of me. I don't want the government to take care of me. If I'm going to fail, I want to fail on my own. I want to fail because I made the mistake. And, this kind of gets to the point of, this new nonsense with $15 minimum wage across the whole country.
Mm.
I mean, that
Mm.
is asinine to me. How are you going to tell a business what is a proper pay for them? And how is
That's right.
$15 in New York State or New York City the same as North Dakota? It's not. You're going to
That's right.
break businesses. And they want that. They don't want small businesses. They don't want mom and pop stores or mom and pop bakeries. They want the big box stuff. And you can see that from exactly what we were looking at with the quarantine. When the quarantine came out, what was shut down and what wasn't? The mom and pop stores were shut down. Big box stores were open. I can go stand in line at ShopRite or Lowe's or Home Depot, um, as long as I was standing 6 feet from the person in front of me, but a foot and a half to the person next to me. I guess apparently the virus only goes forward. Um, I could do that, but I can't go to my local bakery, or I can't go to my local haircut or barber. I can't do that. It's it it I mean, I don't want to say, I don't want to use their language and say, you got to follow the science, but I mean, it's just asinine what they've put us through and what we've allowed them to put us through.
Right. And of course, they pick and choose which science to
Yeah.
use, because we know that as far as the inviolability of a life of the child, we know that that begins at conception. It's clearly evident. The science
Mm.
shows it. People can attest to that. Every time they go in and have an ultrasound and they see that human being developed. But the Democrats will only incorporate the science when it supports their political expedience, when it supports their agenda. We could say the same thing with man-made climate change. We could see it with the pandemic, and so they only use the science for their political expedience. They're not objective about it as much as we are and should be. And the other thing too, Josh, I wanted to mention is the very first words of our state constitution are that the people are free and independent. Very first words of the Article 1, privileges, rights, and privileges of the people. So if the people are free and independent, as every representative, including the governor and the justices on the court, should know and believe in, as they support the Constitution, they take the oath to support the Constitution. If they believe that people are inherently free and independent, then they can only legislate and they execute laws and use judicial review in lieu of the fact that people are inherently free and independent. And this is what the people need to understand. The voters need to understand. They need to evaluate their pick or their vote on the candidate, on whether that candidate supports the idea, in the Constitution, the constitutional idea that the people are indeed inherently free and independent. And it also says that all political power, Josh, is in the people, not the governor, not the legislators. We elect them as our representatives, but the people have the ultimate political power. And I would doubt, Josh, that the majority of the people in New Jersey are supporting Phil Murphy and his arbitrary handling of this pandemic.
I hope so. I mean, realistically, the majority of the state didn't vote for him in the first place. So it was one of the least,
That's right.
the lowest turnout for a governor ever. I'm sure there's some sort of fact check somewhere, but percentage wise, I would say we're
there
30%,
was
nothing. I mean, there was no one that was interested.
It was like
in
30% of the electorate. Yeah,
So I mean, that's really
correct. 30%.
That's what you get when you don't pay attention, when you don't get involved, when you don't care, when you just say, they're all the same. And there are some races where both the candidates, it's basically the same. One's just waving his Republican flag, the other's waving their Democrat flag, but their policy positions are all the same, and none of them are worth a damn. So I mean, I'm hoping that we get a strong race this year against Murphy. I think so far we only have maybe one or two people on the Republican side. It'd be nice to see that the Democrats step up and try to push on him. Because I've heard a lot of Democrats, and I've been monitoring social media with Democrats, and you're right, they're not all that thrilled with him either, because it's their parents' business that's gone now. It's their heritage, it's their future that's gone now. But then on the other hand, I see the younger ones, the younger Democrats, who can't wait for this $15. For some reason, they think this is going to be some cure-all, like their jobs are not going to dry up. And they want to talk about college is so much money, and I don't have any experience. When I get out, I got to work a $7 an hour job, or I got to work cash and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, well, that's because they keep raising the minimum wage. Those minimum wage jobs, I mean, they're for high school kids. They're for low entry level kids who are trying to build up a resume, trying to build up experience that you've never done this before. I mean, it's a shock, when you go from your parents' house and you got to go to work every day, and you got to show up on time, and you got to look nice, and you got to do this and that. Your boss is hagging you. That's an experience, a lived experience that you need to have before a certain age. If you come out of college with a degree, you already have this thing with you that says, I did this special thing. I graduated. I'm certified in whatever my degree is. So you already have this elevated sense of self, but you've never built, this goes back to the community thing. You've never built that foundation. And it hits you in the face when you come out and you say, I got to take this $10 an hour job, but my college loan's, $100,000. How am I ever going to do this? Well, you do it. I mean, it is funny that the Democrats continue to vote for these policies, and they don't stop and think that the long-term ramifications when these policies are actually executed, and the Democrats get their policies executed, that make no mistake about it. They're very good that way. When those policies are executed, the long-term ramifications of that are deadly to people. And it's criminal what we have done to ourselves.
Excellent points, Josh. And we could question the constitutionality of wage and price controls.
Oh God!
Nowhere in the articles explaining the enumerated responsibilities of the legislature gives them the ability or the authority to interfere between the free exchange of work for wages between an employer and an employee. That is between those two entities. Now, the constitutional responsibility of the legislature and civil government would be to enforce contracts between employees and employers, but there is no constitutional validity or no constitutional authority giving legislators and governors or even the court to rule in favor of interfering in the free exchange of labor for wages between an employee and an employer. And of course, we know that there are a lot of jobs out there that aren't worth $15 an hour yet.
Nope.
And these hurt the employer. They also hurt the employee who may not be able to get the 15, may not be able to accurately achieve or excel or grow starting at 15. He may need to start, or that person may need to start at 10 or $12 an hour.
Yep.
That's completely the decision of the person paying the wage and the person who voluntarily agrees to work for the wage. The government, as we've said, doesn't have the authority to do this at all. And it's very important that people realize that in a free market society, the market is what dictates the wage, the product, the need for labor, and that's what needs to be protected. And the government doesn't do a good job in that. As a matter of fact, when it gets involved with wage and price controls, which really started, Josh, with FDR. FDR
Yeah.
started the wage and price controls. And this is what we're going to be talking about, the Constitutional Republicans, as we educate the people in order to reform back to our constitutional republic. But we're going to be talking about the overall and the all-encompassing influence of the FDR administration. And we'll be talking about LBJ, who took it up to it and ratcheted it up to another level. And the Democrats have continued. These are all progressive ideals that we're talking about. Wage and price controls, minimum wage, the direct executive orders, senators being voted in by the public, the elimination of the 17th Amendment. It goes on and on and on, or the creation of the 17th Amendment, rather. But all of these things are indicative of the all-encompassing and far-reaching tentacles, if you will, of progressivism. And this is what Murphy and Biden and all the Democrats are ardent disciples of. And we need to teach the people that this is infringing upon their civil liberties and what the Declaration said, that the God-given unalienable rights rather than government rights. And this is the great dichotomy that exists in our nation today, and people need to know it.
So in your opinion, why do you suppose no one's ever picked up a court case like that? Why has no one ever said, this government imposing wages across the board, across every sense of industry, is unconstitutional, is outside their swim lane. They're not there to be dictating the prices. I mean, could you imagine the government coming in saying you can't sell your house for that much, even though the people are standing there with that money saying we want to buy this house? Could you imagine that? Like, that's exactly what they're doing with businesses. And and we always focus on the worker and the employee relationship, but what about the cost inflation outside of that? If you're going to make this industry $15 an hour, well, that cost is going to get passed on the consumer, and the consumer are the very people that you're trying to help in the first place. So you're artificially creating an environment of prices that don't mean anything anymore. If you raise everyone to $15, I saw someone tongue in cheek say, why not $100 an hour? I mean, why not? There's no argument to say why $15? I mean, there's no difference in my mind between saying that I need to have $15 an hour or $100 an hour, because you're artificially creating some sort of environment anyway, and the costs are going to get passed along to the consumer, and they're going to end up having to get paid more in their jobs too. And then we're back at where we were at. I don't know. I don't know.
Exactly right.
I get tired of talking about the same thing over and over again. But it seems that they're not listening. For something in their head, or in the way they're rationalizing this is, and this kind of gets to a point I did want to bring up, is the messaging of the Democrats. We have to stop chasing their messaging. We're always, and by we, conservatives, Republicans, we're always chasing. The time we come back with a rebuttal, by the time we come back with a rebuttal, they've already framed the narrative, and they already know the answer that we're going to come back with and say, that's just such and such. I mean, their go-to thing now is that, well, that's just racist, which is absurd to even think about when you think about the party that believes that all men and women, it's the general men, are created equal, and that no man has power over another man unless it's willing. And we are We're always playing their game. We're always following. That's why I just ignore that. You want to go ahead and say, call me this or call people that, go ahead, say it. I'm going to move on to a topic that's actually important to the working class men and women of this world. And I'm hoping that that message starts to stick and get through all this other nonsense. It's like we're a cat following a laser pointer all the time. Like, oh, we got to make sure that we check this box. We got to make sure that we, do the Democrats approve? Does the media approve of what we're saying? I don't care anymore. Like, why are we caring about that? Why aren't we marching to our own path? We have a path. We have a set of base principles, which we all should be following. And you brought it up before, pro-life should be the very symbol of where we are at. And we still have candidates that are out there that are pro-choice as a Republican. Now, there are other issues, fringe issues that I say, okay, we can debate about here and there throughout the party. But there needs to be a sense of, this is what the Republican message is at its core value. And I don't know, I honestly don't know if we have that. And I've asked people before, what does it mean to actually be Republican? And I kind of get a lot of, less government. Well, that's great, but tell me what it actually means to be Republican.
Right, and you're identifying what essentially why we created the constitutional Republican movement. The Republican Party has lost its way, principally. In New Jersey, it's just the party of so-called fiscal discipline or fiscal restraint, and we don't even see that anymore. So essentially, in New Jersey, the Republican Party has completely lost its principle. So that's why we say we go back to where Lincoln went back to, our founding father, and that's the Declaration of Independence. So the principles that we talked about earlier, the laws of nature and nature's God, that would mean that we have policies that are pro-life, that are pro-family, that are law and order based. Then we talk about the self-evident truth that all men are created equal. So that means that all application of law and all legislation is equally applied to everybody. We're not making special exemptions, or we're not creating special privileges for anyone. If anyone should get a special privilege, it should be those who've served in our military and who have put their natural rights on the line to defend the Constitution and our nation. But outside of that, it shouldn't be based on racial groups, sexual groups, religious groups, ethnic groups at all. All the 14th Amendment, all law must be applicably applied equally and indiscriminately to all. So as Republicans, we have to back that up. Then we talk about the self-evident or the unalienable rights of life. That, of course, would mean the life of the child from the beginning, from conception, and also the life of those victims who've been killed in crime. And where's the justice anymore? Why aren't criminals treated as criminals rather than victims that most people, or most of the Democrats and far too many Republicans, treat criminals as victims? They need to be treated as criminals. And they need to be given justice. So, and then we have liberty. We should be at liberty to go and make a living here, and we should be at liberty to own a home and to keep the material that we earn, which is our money. So all of the Republican Party principles are still right there in the Declaration of Independence. And until we get back to that, and this is what we're calling for, that all policy can be formulated on the principles articulated in the Declaration, just the way the founders devised the Constitution around the principles of the Declaration of Independence. So that answers the question of, where are the Republicans going to get their foundation from? They've obfuscated it. And I would say something I said the other day, Josh, that I think that Republicans today would not come anywhere close to the Republicans of 1860 and 1861. Hundreds of thousands, as a fact, 83,000 Union soldiers from New Jersey went to war to defend the idea of the self-evident truth that all men are created equal. I doubt if we could get 8 or 9 people to sign up for that today if we had to go to war against the injustice of slavery. So the Republican Party has lost its moral backbone, and it's because we've turned our back on the Declaration of Independence and its principles. And the constitutional Republicans, we are calling for the party to return back to the principles of the Declaration of Independence. And the other two, one thing I wanted to mention to your other question, you were asking about the fact that, where are the people in regards to these injustices and many of the legislation, unjust legislation. I think there's two
Yeah.
reasons for that, Josh. Number one would be the idea of a living constitution that's continually evolving. The words not meaning what they initially meant to be. They can be manipulated. And then that's number one. And then number two is judicial restraint. A perfect example would be the ruling given in the Affordable Care Act, substantiating the mandate, which was completely unconstitutional. You can't force people to buy or purchase a commercial product, and this is because the courts say, well, in this regard, we're gonna follow the Constitution, and we're gonna acquiesce to the responsibilities of the legislature because they're the ones who are given the responsibility of making law. But yet, the president's very much is making law with every executive order, which they don't look at through judicial review. They practice judicial restraint. They just kind of let it go anymore, as opposed to looking at the Constitution, reviewing the constitutionality of a law through judicial review, which John Marshall, the first Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice, really incorporated and got us off in starting our judiciary branch. So there's two reasons why you may have frustration. Why aren't there representatives standing up to that? And it's because they've acquiesced again to progressive ideals like living constitutions and judicial restraint rather than judicial review. More progressivism.
Yeah. I just saw that, sorry, something came up where I saw that they took Marjorie Greene's committee duties away. It's nuts. This is nuts. We live in clown world.
So, Josh, talk to us a little bit about your involvement with your county Republican organization, and tell us how we can get these principles that the Constitutional Republicans are talking about in that county organization. And, we came up with a platform. Our national party didn't have a platform this year for the first time in our Republican Party history. We had a 17-point platform. That is something. What can you do if you don't believe in something? And the whole point of it was, or at the end of the day, well, it's the Trump agenda. The Republican Party was around longer and has always been based upon, as I said before, these principles of the Declaration, not the ideas of one man or putting our faith in one man to do what is impossible for him to do. And that is to grow the party around established principles, universal principles that don't change with time, space, or personality. And that's what we have to get back to. So tell me about your involvement with the local organization and what we can do to get these principles back into that organization throughout the state.
Yeah, actually, this goes back to social media. When I was not affiliated with the Republican, I was Republican registered, but I wasn't involved in any of the politics or anything like that. But, I just kept voicing my opinion. And actually, our fantastic chairman, Jerry Scanlon, reached out to me and said, "Are you a real person? Are you a real thing?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm a real guy." He's like, "Why don't you come to a meeting?" He said, "You guys even have meetings? I don't even know." He's like, "Yeah, come to a meeting." So I went to a meeting. And from there, I've just been involved with helping out as best I can, making phone calls, trying to get people registered to vote Republican. We can see, where people are voting or that people are voting. And, New Jersey is a state where if you're not registered as Democrat or Republican, you can't vote in the primary. And I think that we're losing out on that independent base. So what happens is in the general, we get these Republican candidates and the independent base says, well, this candidate's milquetoast. I don't want them. Why can't the Republicans ever put out a good candidate? And, I go back to them and say, well, we need people to be registered Republicans so we can get a better primary candidate in there. The one thing I will say about Sussex County is we are an open county. We don't have a line. I feel that every county should move in that direction as soon as possible. I don't understand the point of a line. It seems to me that it does tip the scales in some way. Now, if you have an overwhelming candidate coming through there, then that's fine. But I mean, I don't really see the point in it. I think our
Mhm.
good friend, Mr. Matt Rooney, has come up with comments about that as well. I think he wrote an article a while back in Save New Jersey regarding that same issue. I don't like it. I don't like the conventions. I don't like having to go to the party bosses and beg for your approval. And I've gotten arguments with candidates before about this when they lost out on the convention in that county, a particular county. And I got arguments. I said, you're not there, you're not running to inspire a committee of people. You're there to inspire a voting base. So if you are not getting out to the people, if you're not going into those hard, rough areas that Republicans never go to, or if you're not going to events constantly and being involved, being in the forefront of the people, then no, it doesn't matter what that committee says or not. If that committee says, yeah, we love you, that's great, but you still don't have the vote of the people, then it's worthless. And I think that the model that Sussex County has set up um, allows for that. We allow for many candidates to come in and do their best, and really whoever inspires the people the most ends up winning. And again, I've not lived in another county where the county line existed, or you needed to have all this, I don't even know how to put it really. We don't need to, go and say, hey, can I have your approval to run or this and that? Yeah. So maybe it works for them, but to me, honestly, Sussex County, to be fair, we're a very Republican county, and there really is a reason behind that. And I would say that the way we have things set up is the reason for that.
Okay. And I'll have to say, Josh, that my favorite county chairman in New Jersey is indeed Chairman Scanlon. He
He's
is
awesome, isn't he?
outstanding. He's a great
Yeah.
guy. He's he's very engaged. He's got a great personality, and you can see that he's really a grower, and he supports his people, and he gives a lot of enthusiasm, and he's really a great guy. And I'm happy to know or to Mr. Chairman Scanlon, and I'm very I'm a big fan of his. And
If it
as I
if it
said,
wasn't
he's my favorite.
if it wasn't for him, and a bunch of the other folks that we have up there in Sussex County, Mr. Hayden, Miss Hart, as well as Mr. Steinhardt, former Chairman Steinhardt.
Yeah,
If it wasn't for
that's
them,
right.
I would have just been another loudmouth keyboard person, not getting involved in organizations like Arise, not trying to help out candidates. I would have just been, another person not getting active. So I would
Well,
wish that other chairmen and committee people and senators and assemblymen and women around the state start to look at some of these social media folks, because there are a lot of hardworking folks that are that are on there that are not afforded the right environment to voice their concerns, and maybe those concerns are not being heard by the right people. So
that's right. And I think, and I've suggested this, is that what we need to do is to go around to all the county organizations, all the Republican organizations, and talk about getting back to the Declaration, the principles of the initial Republican Party principles, because they will resonate with a greater number of voters. They will resonate with a great majority of the independent voters, which are the largest voting bloc in the state. And we need to coalesce around these principles rather than personality. And talking about personalities, Josh, I want to conclude our very engaging conversation with something that I saw that you had written, that the particular representative who most accurately represents your view is Rand Paul.
yeah.
And I have to say before you answer that I've always been a fan of Rand Paul, because he's very constitutionally literate. He looks to uphold the Constitution, And he was my first pick back in 2016. And I agree with your estimation and your fondness for Mr. Paul. But tell us why you like Senator Paul.
Uh, to be honest, when he speaks, he resonates with me. I feel, I'm sure that there's other folks throughout our Congress. I feel that he's one of the few people that approach every single topic, whether it's large or small, with a logical mindset. And he understands that the government is not there to intrude on every single thing that you are doing. They are there to set the boundaries and to make sure that, states don't bicker and argue back and forth. He takes that approach. He is anti getting involved in foreign affairs to the point where we're getting involved in foreign wars. I'm not a big fan of that as well. It's just not something in me. I don't feel.
That's right.
I don't know. I just have a moral problem with sending someone else's son or daughter across the world to fight for an issue that has nothing to do with our nation, has nothing to do with our constitutional republic, and I would never sign up for something like that. So for me, he always has a certain calmness about him. As someone with Irish heritage, I kind of get tempered a little bit every once in a while. But so whenever I listen to him or even his father, I kind of get a sense of calm from them. And I feel that if we had, 10 more Rand Pauls in Congress, we would be on the right track. And it would be great to see more folks like him get elected with carrying a sense of logic about them.
That's right. Now, remember, during the first presidential debates in 2016, and Rand Paul went after Trump for supporting and giving campaign contributions to Hillary Clinton and Chuck Schumer and all the Democrats, and clearly identifying right from the very beginning that Mr. Trump never had any Republican principles at all. And Trump attacked Rand Paul ad hominem, talking about his looks or talking about how short he is, as opposed to sticking with the principles by which Rand Paul conducted himself and still conducts himself as a representative to this day. And that's something that people should remember. And of course, majority of the people like the lambast, they like the bullying attitude, as opposed to the statesman and the person who was moderate and prudent in their behavior, as a Rand Paul would be. And Rand Paul still continues to serve. And that's that's attributable to his decency and to his to his class. And that's what we need from our Republican representatives.
I agree. Fully agree.
Josh, it's been great. Is there anything else that you'd like to say? Well, we're going to do this again. It's been a great conversation. We'll get together again and talk about, but what would you like to say to the audience before we sign off for tonight?
Honestly, this is just to you. I want to thank you for having me. I do appreciate it. Every sort of avenue where we can get attention to Arise is a positive step. So I look forward to potentially another meetup and have further discussion about Arise. And from a personal perspective, I always appreciate the way you approach every situation as well. I think that you are a very strong voice in our state, and I hope that you continue doing that. So thank you for that.
Well, I thank you very much, Josh, for those kind words, and I greatly appreciate them. And, we're working together as a team. What you're doing with Arise and serving in Sussex County with the Republican organization and talking about these issues so eloquently, like you did with the minimum wage. This is why we'll have another conversation, because there's plenty more to talk about. But I really appreciate you and all your hard work. And I know you're very engaged on Facebook, and I appreciate your support and all the things that you do to help the constitutional Republicans out. So with that being said, I want to thank you, and we'll do it again, Josh. We'll talk soon. And we have to remember, especially this month as we sign off, remember what Lincoln said. Lincoln said, liberty for all. Thank you very much, Josh. Have a
God
good
bless.
night. God bless you.